don't guess I need much of an introduction, so
You normally introduce the speaker. So.
I normally do it, so I'll turn hat two different ways, you know. I've done enough of these, everybody knows who I am, or who they think I am anyway, so we'll just get this thing going. The topic is what says IBMI services. These are some new views that have come out, and most of them is around 7.1 or some around 7.1, and I thought they were all came out about 7.1, but I found a lot of them came out at 6.1 that I had not noticed or whatever. So we're going to a couple main things. The series, the IBMI services, and we were talking about power a while ago. This is IBMI services. IBMI is what IBM called this stuff. Of course, it's been printed sometime back before they decided to use the power terminology, and for the I catalogs. And I'm including some examples with pretty much each with it all. A little bit of terminology comparison. I'm going to be using primarily the terms over on the right side, because these are SQL views, SQL procedures, user-defined table functions, and it's all for SQL. And rather than call a library, I'm going to refer to it as a schema. I'm going to be using the terms over on the right side. And you can see how they relate to kind of native 400 or RPG type terminologies. Instead of field, the record, row, column. So I'm referring to things like on the right side. IBMI services are a lot of system functions now can be accessed through an SQL view or through a UDTF, which is a user-defined table function, which is a program that's used, and you use a function table, SQL table function, and it brings back data like if it was coming from a file or a table or a view or index or whatever. And then I threw in a procedure just so you can see how that's put together and how it's used. In an example here, I'm using SQL names. You can see on the left side, schedule job info. That's the name of the view. The columns, couple of the columns in it are scheduled job name, next submission date, all spelled out with underscores. On the right there, you can see SEPT underscore job. That's the short 10 character or less cryptic names that they are in the documentation if you want to use the short names. I use SQL a lot in things. I tend to use the longer name. It seems to make more sense, and it's understandable than some of these cryptic names.
Are those IBM supplied names?
Yes. For the views for the services, well, look at 5 of them here. There are a lot more than 5, but we're just do 5 at this point. And if you need to have any more, then the documentation is out there. I got a couple websites where it shows the documentation at the end, and you can look at the rest of them and see what all they are, and all the columns that are used, and some of the values that it uses, how big the attributes of the column. And they use a lot of numeric fields, and most of them are integers. There's not a whole lot of pack stuff. So, and they use some of these are DB clob, blob fields that they have in the views. They have some varchar and some various other things. So it's not the old standard, it's packed or alpha. they got timestamps, all kinds of different things. So I didn't get into that. I mean, you look at the documentation and see what it is when you need to use it and that sort of thing. Scheduled job information. In fact, I used this view this afternoon to look up something. And one of the things is kind of where a program or a command is used in a scheduled job. We have a SAS box or cloud box. There's 3,200 or so jobs out there in this scheduled job. I don't really want to do it the hard way, the long way. And the long way that we used to do it, or you still can do it, use a system command, work job schedule entry, output to printer, to a spool file, and then go search the spool file. You'll be out there for a while. Now, if you get the basic information, it'll be kind of like one line per, but you don't get full information. So then you can just search for it. I've done this many times in the past, and it's pain. But we got an SQL view for it. So all we have to do now is just run an SQL statement to get the same thing. So I'm selecting the scheduled job entry number. All this is spelled out. The scheduled job name and all the way down from scheduled job info. And I'm looking for all jobs that run on Tuesday. If it runs on a Tuesday, now notice here, if it doesn't run every day, the days will be listed in the table in that column. If it runs all, it'll be star all, which includes Tuesday. You know, so you'd do this one, you'd run that statement, and then you would get something that looks like that. I just was able to only copy the first about 100 characters. Depending on how many columns you select in your statement, of course, you know, it could get kind of wide. And I'd cut it off at about 100 characters or so. You see there, you got the entry number, the job name. It's the scheduled date value is scheduled days. All this can be seen when you look at it on a green screen by command. 2 or 3 screens. This is all one row, all the same information. What's nice about this, it's queryable, and you can sort on it, search on it, do whatever. It's pretty nice. I've used it probably about once every couple of weeks, including this afternoon, to find I was on a customer site box. What scheduled job do you have this? So if I can take a look at it, because they were having some issues. So just find that job name real quick for that. I was looking for a specific program. Library info, library list information. Real easy way to get the library list of the job, the current job, into your program for whatever you need for. You don't have to use an API. I just use this part right here. It'll bring it in right into your program. It'll bring a library per row. So you just
like the library, when you're selecting from library list info, where's that stored at?
It's in a view called library list info.
Okay.
What table is behind it or what it's doing, documentation doesn't get too deep on that.
Is it available for everybody to use, or is it in certain library where you would, like, is it QGPL?
It's a QSys2.
Okay.
I didn't put the library name up there. It's in QSys2. Yeah.
So if you put select all because you don't care, that will work fine too?
Sure. I just limited it a little bit instead of just putting the splat.
But
Yeah.
if you don't want to type, you can.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You can. I'll get to a couple other things that it's kind of every time. Notice that IBM kind of messed up a little bit. They wouldn't do that really. Notice I had to put double quotes around the word type. Column name happens to be type. Type has to be an SQL reserved word. So you must put double quotes around it. I don't know why somebody didn't catch that before they released all that, but hey. But they didn't. So that's, and I found out the hard way, of course. It kept telling me, this doesn't exist, doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? You know? I had to figure out what the deal was. And so when you run it, you get that query will bring this up. I copied the first 14 of them. And it tells you it's a system, it's a product library, it's user library. It tells you what it is and gives you the text description on it. If you bring it into a program to use just your library list, you wouldn't have to have but just that one. All you had to bring that one column. You might want to do the position to make sure they're sorted correctly. You keep it that way, that sort of thing. But whatever you need to use it for, there's not a lot much more information on this view than what you see. I think there's one other column that really didn't mean anything, so I left it off. System values. This one, you can get them, but you almost have, it's kind of a kludgy way. And you have to select the value, get it, and it'll bring it in. This one will bring all system values on a screen for you.
So David, why is that better than the retrieve system value? The CL command.
Well, if you're in an RPG program, it saves you from having to play some games. Also, these are most of these are done, in my opinion, of these for external non-CL RPG users. Okay. I didn't see that in the documentation anywhere, but it's a lot of functionality that we can do that without this. But it is a way you go out there and get it with an SQL statement without having to use one of them APIs or call a CL to get it for you or whatever.
You can do that just like that inside an RPG program?
Sure, you can embed that in this RPG program, sure.
You can bring that in.
Yeah, sure can.
That would be the difference there. I think on a free system, can you pull that to an output file? Or is that some of those commands I can't remember?
And this one I don't remember either.
Okay.
Notice I mentioned earlier that some of these columns were not character, and CCSID was 1200. 1200 is PC ASCII, so they're primarily set up to retrieve and do things from connectivity, some PC or Unix or whatever connected to the system, doing some of this stuff. But since it's there, I think it's easy to use from inside an RPG. The third column down, called current character value, it's in a CCSID of 1200. To be able to read it on a green screen, you're going to have to change it to 37. So you cast that column to character, and I just named it 60. All I need to have out of it. Specify the CSSID 37, and you can read it. Otherwise, it's unreadable on a green screen, on a 400. And there's the information, some of the information you get from it. You get the system value name on the left side. If it's a numeric value, it'll be in one column. If it's a character value, it's in a different column. Of course, that bottom one, Q CCSID, that's the default CCSID, which is typically 65535. Not over to anything. History log size is 5,000. The current dollar symbol, current symbol currency symbol is a $sign. I mean, you can. Now, I think there was 6 or 7 pages of system values. I just picked off I think I paged down one time and did a screenshot. You know, not picking anything out specifically. I just did some copies. You see the hour was 20, the time was, the day was 13. So I told you I did this at 8:47 last night. So when I pulled that in, so it just another way you can get some data without using some of them APIs. I don't have a problem with those APIs because I've been using them so much, but they are daunting sometimes. Oh man, it's one I got to set up a user space. Yeah, I've done it many times and I got a sample program, but it's still a pain. I write one statement and I get what I need, drive on. Then we get some license information. I know you can get it from green screen. I just included this one because it was easy to get. The product test had to be converted again also. And the name of the view is license info. I didn't bring every column in, again, because I only got 100 characters I can put on and that's about turned out what I could get on a slide. And that's a sample of the information you get. You get the product ID, the license term, the release level, feature ID, processor group, and I just brought the text in. There's 4 or 5 times that more information, which may be more useful to somebody looking for licensing, but I just use this as an example. Hopefully this will be somewhat useful. You can get some user information about user profiles. My example I just used, I selected, again, everything this time, from QSys2 user info, and then I just, keep the results without being so terribly long. I just selected the sign on attempts not valid column to be greater than 0. And you get something that looks like that. Attempts not valid is greater than 0, so obviously that they're all going to have something in there. If you notice down there, the guest log on, I don't know who made that, created in the system. So apparently somebody's been trying to get on 2,000 times. And the previous log on sign on is the date is empty. So apparently it's never been nobody successful getting in on guest. So it's been disabled, and the password change date was what, 2000 and no, it's 10. I don't know. It's just some data that's on our test box, and it's just I don't even know what some of those things are, but the users, I'm not familiar with most of them.
So do you have to have security authority to see that information?
I think there is some kind of authority, but I got enough. So you look in the documentation, it tells you what all you have to have to be able to do it.
If you're running it inside an RPG program, wouldn't the user have to have the authority?
I would think.
Yeah, it would be authority in the documentation. I would think that would be something that would have to have some higher authority than just a standard user. But if you got the programs that compiled it owner, and the owner has authority to see it, wouldn't the user have authority to see it running from a menu? It's just an easier way to get some. I wouldn't know that you'd want to use that much in a program. It's more of the administrators and things like that to get a quick see of what's going on in the system.
What UDTS stands for?
Okay, user defined table function. You got user-defined functions. You know, they've been around for a long time.
Is that like triggers?
Pardon?
Like the triggers in the tables? When you have a trigger in a table?
Oh no, it's not that way. Now what this is, a table function is that you can you write an RPG program, COBOL, C, whatever language that IBM of the 400 supports, and that program would need to return a result set. That result set is then queryable by SQL as if it were a table on the system. So in that program, it could be pulling data from a number of tables. It could be calculating percentages. It could be doing all kinds of things. But it comes back as a result set. The result of that is all queryable, just like it was if it was a SQL table. Pretty neat little deal. I guess show an example of a couple of them. The job log info is the first one, and then we'll look at active job. There's a number of these. 7.1 is a little more complex. These require parms, where you're sending parms to the program and it returns the result set based on that. And then you can query it in a where clause after that. So you're not depending on all of that yourself. It's just like it's a table function. It serves as a table. And in active job info, there's several that returning journal information. They're a lot more complex.
So the data retained will be in memory until you query it through SQL?
Now
But no physical file is written.
No. Display job log info. This the existing command method is display job, and you can see what you get. You know, that was actual job log I got last night. So user-defined table function example. Again, here I'm selecting only the columns I want. Again, you can use your splat to get all of them, with the exception, since it's the asterisk, you'll not be able to read all columns.
Yes.
Because of that guy right there. You won't be able to read it. It'll bring it back to you, but it's non-readable.
But at least in the column, it will give me message text, okay? So
It'll give you message text, but it'll be.
yeah, but at least I know what to do with.
Oh yeah, sure. You know that. Oh, I got to cast it to 37. Yeah, that's. Now this one from table. This is a function that to use a user-defined table function. You got to use the function SQL function. And the first parm of that, the table, is the procedure to get the data. You can also use an RPG program in there. We got one we have in the system that we have done that way. Instead of a QSys2 job log underscore info as a function, it's probably written in C, CLE or something like that. But it doesn't really matter what language it is. We've got one where we did an RPG program. We pass it 2 or 3 arms and it brings back whatever columns that it's programmed to do. And then you can do your selection on it just like it would if it was a single table. You don't even really know where the data come from, really. Or if it came from a table or several tables. For this particular one, I used the asterisk as the parm, which brings back current job. And that is the same job log brought back by SQL as it was the couple slides ago brought back by the display job command. But in this case, I can eliminate. I could say request, or I'm looking for only informational or escape or whatever, and I can select those values using SQL, and I can leave all the rest of that job log alone.
What do you find that you use that one for? What are you looking for typically when you're doing something like this?
If you got a long one, it would help to see what when you got 200 or 300 pages, you can do the searching on it. But here I can select the message type I want and leave the rest of them out. In place of that asterisk, I don't know, did I use this? Okay. You can put in the job information, job ID, the number, user, job name, or job number, job name, user, and you put all that in as one in one string, and it will go get that job. This one I just chose as a simple little thing, just bring me my current job. Yeah.
On the first slide, you said I'm going to use
Program, a stored procedure is a program that's stored in the database. It's not normal. Typically, you have your objects in one library, programs, CLs, RPGs, and then your data in another one. A stored procedure is a program that's stored in the database, the data library, not the object library.
So basically, for example, you have one library where you keep all your programs, okay? In another library, you keep some of your data. If this stored procedure specifically deal with this library, then all you have to do, okay, you compile this program, and instead of putting where all the programs supposed to be,
No.
you just stick inside
It depends. If you're using an external program and you're defining an SQL stored procedure that calls that program will need to go where it normally goes. The stored procedure that gets created, actually it's a C program, what it actually ends up being, it will be stored in the database.
But you do it manually. You do it manually. Or
No. When you
You set up the stored procedure.
when you create the stored procedure, when you write the code for it, create procedure,
yes.
whatever, that is created by SQL into the database. Now, if you're referencing an external program, that program is where it belongs, or where you normally keep programs, but the stored procedure will be in the database, and it just knows that's where it is. When you create the stored procedure, when the information for a procedure, in that case, gets written to the system catalog, it's viewable in a view called sysprocs, P-R-O-C-S. When it puts the code into that, the library it founded at the time of creation is part of the database. So if you got an external program, say RPG, that does some work for you, and you've created a stored procedure for it so you can call it from SQL, don't move it, because you can't find it. Because the SQL will put now, you don't have to tell it what library it's in, as long as it's in the library list. It'll find it and take that library along with it and write it to the system tables or the catalog.
For example, when I'm looking for, okay, I have library with some of the data engagement. I want to find if somebody sticks to a procedure in that library. I'm looking for extension, SQL something? Do you know what I try to catch?
What you'll see, if you just do a work object on it and find it, you'll probably see a type of program, CLE.
CLE, that's all. That's all the extension.
It's a CLE. I mean, it's a C, written in C, ILE, C program.
I think it's just like the triggers also they are kept in the data libraries.
Yeah, it's a stored, reason why they call it stored procedure, because it's stored in the database or it's stored with the data. Now, that's why that's there. Now, if your stored procedure is written only in SQL, references no external programs, it's stored, the whole thing is in there. The stored procedure, it will be in the database, but if you do an external call to RPG or COBOL or whatever, then it's stored where you normally keep them. It just knows where it is. It goes out there, runs it, comes back and does its thing. I've got some of them I've put out in.
You deal with this stuff only using Navigator or
Use what?
IBM Navigator?
No.
No.
I just write a statement in a source member and go for it. Run SQL statement. That way we can put it in Aldon and have it stored in a change control product, and then it's just stored as a. It can be put in there as an actual procedure, and it'll go into the database. Aldon will handle all that. Yeah, it's these. Some applications would have limited use on these, but I'm beginning to use a lot of these views because I can limit what I look at on a long database. Active job information. I just picked a couple of these to show as examples. There's a number of these looking at jobs and this and those things, but you can do a work active job output to print, and then you get something that looks like that when you look at the spool file. This is another table function, user find table function that, whoops, never mind. I put something from the next slide on this one. Okay. This statement is on another page, and I've overwritten it in my hurry to get this thing done the last couple of days. When Bertie said, what was it? First part of last week said, I won't make it, can you do it? So this is another table function to do this. The statement looks a lot like this one, except down here it has the active job info, and it has 4 different params over here. One's no, the other 4 are all asterisk. In other words, I want everything, and then I can select it out with the SQL statement. Otherwise, I can say, oh, give me active only, or this or that, something else, So.
Can you select the subsystem that's in, or would that be?
If it's in there, you can select that, not necessarily with the parm, but with the SQL statement. Any column that has a column that comes back, you can select on that column, sort on the column, select on it, exclude it, include it, whatever.
Where I'm thinking there is right. Q enters up and going. I've got several places where I just shut down Q enter. There are times where I really don't want to do that. That would be useful for me to find out who's still up.
Who's still on there? I would.
I know what specific job to go.
Yeah, that one. I think there's another one that might do that a little bit better. But anyway, well, here we go. This one I just pulled whatever happened to be, and I think I went down a page. No, I started at number 1. This is the very first one, and I just copied the first 15 and just stuck it in there. It has a subsystem there as the 3rd column there. And you can say, I want subsystem of ITS SBS, for example. And that's all it's going to bring to your screen. Even though the table function will get more than that. See, it's a job type, batch, subsystem job, ASJ, auto start job. You can see what kind it is, the status, and there's about 20 other columns out there to get other information. I just use these as an example. And this would do what you were thinking too. You can say, I want subsystem Q enter. And then it would only bring to folks that had a job in Q enter if there are any. You know. Some of these are, I don't know if it's any better or easier to use than the command, but you know, if you're coming in from external systems, you don't have anything else.
Automating it though would be the.
Yeah, that's the easy part. Yeah.
Obviously, I have to work out your job and do that. That requires you to physically delete the screen.
That's because I'm right there looking at it. This you can put it. It's you can put it in a. Yeah, you put it in a program in a embedded SQL statement and bring it in your program, do whatever you need to with. You know, grab this, get a list, send a message to all these users. Hey, get off. You know, in interactive. You know, you just call the program and just let it do all the work. And this is the one procedure that I said I was going to include. You can execute a system command from an SQL statement. Again, this is primarily for external systems signing on to the database. So you can do this. I don't know. I haven't tried it from SQL. I haven't really needed to because I got the Q command exec API, you know. So I may do it one time just to see how it works, you know. But anyway, it's Q command exec. They kept the same name. And in your stored procedure, you just say call and this in here, just add library list entry prod lib 2. You know, it's very simple. If you're using a procedure, then you declare, you can concatenate your command with a library name variable. They're just showing you that it can be done that way. I don't really see a whole lot of need coming from RPG or CL to use this, but it's primarily done for those folks that are not using RPG or CL to do their stuff. They're signing on from somewhere else. And so it is, otherwise you'd have to create a program that done that, you know, an RPG or CL, that was called from a stored procedure, then you call a stored procedure. Well, this is really a stored procedure because it's in QSys2, but it's a function that IBM has made available for us to use. They didn't have we don't have a whole lot of procedures yet, and I thought this was the simplest one to show. Now I want to include at least one procedure in the presentation. The iCatalog, DB2 for iCatalogs has got 30 or 40 of these. I just pared it down to 3. So you can look at the tables, columns, and views. There's procedures, indexes, every type of SQL type of object there is, there's one of these 4. But I just put 3 of them in here and just using these, sample these out. The systables view contains a row for every table, view or alias in the SQL schema or your data library, whichever you prefer to call it. I just made a simple little thing here. I'm selecting the schema, the table name, the row length, and the table text. You know, there's 50 columns of data you can bring out. So I just did this. Again, you can use that asterisk. Then you come back and say, oh, I've got to cast the table text if I want to read it. You know, and in some applications you may not even need the table text. You just want to know how long that row is. And in that case, you don't need it. And you would get something like that from that statement. I'd only selected just these columns, and you can see the second one down, row length is 545 characters in it, and there's a text for it. The sys columns, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's got a row for every column in every table on the system. And I just selected the schema name, the position, the column name, data type, length, scale, that sort of thing. And then I cast the column text as CCSID 37 so I could read it. I limited it to one library just so that it wouldn't take forever to run that query. And you get the result of that one is this. You get the schema, the table name, the sequence of the column and the column name, the type of column it is, its decimal, scale, precision. Oh, DEC, that should be length. I got carried away on my typing there a while ago. And the column text. I just took the first 10. The table may have hundreds of columns, but just for this. And there's a lot more data than this too. That's some of it I'm not even sure what it's for, but it gives a row for every column. Tells you what size it is and all that sort of stuff. I use this particular quite a bit. Do soft coding data movement.
So this specific, for example, state, city, this specific data is about the server that you're working on?
No, that's just a specific table file, an ACCT.
Oh, that schema there, that's a library name. And it refers to the system that we're on.
City and state, it is about.
Oh, that's just the.
Those are the fields in that table.
That's
file,
description of columns in this table right here.
It's the same information.
It is system table. So,
No.
It just has to do that table. It could be any table you get on the system.
The system table is called sys columns. That's a view over the sys table, which starts with a Q and can't read it.
It has that information on every table on the system.
Yes. Now, this I only just selected 10 rows just to put on the slide. In that particular library, we got some neighborhood of 3,000 tables, and I don't know, about 50,000 different columns.
Massive.
Yeah, you'd have had more. Well, see, we got tons of libraries and things for customer deltas and changes with Aldon and all that kind of stuff. So I had to limit it, otherwise the statement would take forever to run.
Yeah, but you could use that if you were looking for a specific field name.
Oh, yeah, I turn this square statement around and say where column name equals, and leave the schema and the file blank. Don't select those, and it'll go give me every file
That has
or
that.
library. Schema table name that has that column in it,
Yeah.
regardless of type, because different
yeah.
tables would have the column name that column name may have different attributes in different tables. So you could bring all that in if you want.
You needed to find where it's used, that name.
That'll help find what schema and file it's used in. Now, it won't tell you the program it's used, but it'll tell you the table.
Where the table is.
Exactly.
From there you can choose it more.
And then you narrow your scope, because initially, this column is used. Column name is, I don't know, pick a column name, AC code. Where all that used? that at least a column by that name.
Right.
Now this one here happens to be three numeric. Numeric meaning signed, as defined in DDS. But you might find it in another file as decimal. Then you're gonna have to do some.
Find it in another file,
It could be character.
40 characters.
Exactly. So in that particular table, AC code meant whatever it does, area code. AC code in some other table may mean totally something different.
If you were sitting where I can see that, I've picked up a new client and I know nothing about their database, tables and all. That would be useful for me to.
Oh, you could go now. You could use.
All your tables,
Yeah.
at least that have it.
Well, you could.
What tables you got in.
Initially, I would use the sys tables function view. It don't give you the column names, but it gives you all the tables that are there. Right. And then if you need to see columns, then you come to this one, and you can see. Now, the tables view will tell you how many columns are in that table. They just don't give you what the names are. You come to the sys columns view, and it'll tell you what the names are. So, they got a little bit different functions, different uses. Obviously this is going to be a lot longer because it's got more rows in it. Yeah. Okay. The last one on this particular area is let's go to sample of some views. As it contains a row for every view that you have in the system. A view is, as we saw earlier, something like a logical file. A view is nothing more than an SQL statement that selects and connects tables. Typically, up until 6.1, it did not have order by in it. Indexes could not do any selection. They only did order bys. Now at 6.1 and above, they both can do both. So I'm just listing here, I'm just listing the view name and library view and a definition. And that produced a sample data of this. And the schema, the view, and there's one column there that has the SQL text. That is the SQL statement that creates that view. Now, you notice I cut it off over about 50, 60 characters. Some of them were somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000, 7,000 characters to completely define the view.
Does that pick up logical files too as a view, or does it have to actually be?
It'll show up. It won't have an SQL statement. No, I don't think it will. Logicals will show up in a table view, I think. They do show up as and they tell you what it is. No, physicals and tables show up in the table, and it says type of T, type of P. So you can tell how it was created. That SQL, when you create this, you start off with create view as, with name as, and your SQL statement. And that's what goes in that column.
So if the view was created by an SQL that has, are you done?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
If the view was created by an SQL that has a big statement that contains like joins and stuff like that, a big statement. Does it bring all that?
It brings the entire statement, puts it in that column.
Okay.
The entire thing. Now, at
If you got a 100-line SQL statement, it's going to show all.
it's going to be one long string in that column. Yes.
So what's the difference between sysview and the view that you create in the application? If you create the view logical file that used in that specific application, do you think I will be able to find it here?
If it's created in that data over that database, it'll be in there.
Was
Now-
it created
if you have it on the system, this catalog will contain every view created on the system regardless of schema.
Okay.
Now, if you create a collection, SQL collection, the collection function will create these catalogs for that schema in that schema. So it'll have a set of all of these views that only for that schema. However, the system one, the main one, will still contain whatever's in there and what's not in there.
For example, I have application B, and this application grab the data from, in your terminology, schema BBB, whatever. It's just the data. It has 10 different logical files. So I said, hey, select the view from schema BBB, and it will give me these 10 logical files that inside of this schema BBB.
You typically will not, in an SQL statement, use a logical or view, or a index. You typically don't use logical files. You use the physical to bring your data in with. Although it can be used sometimes with logical, but I've seen it not work. So use the physical. Even an embedded SQL program, you typically use the physical file or table, and the logical is there for the system to use if the database decides that the keys in that file match what it needs to use, and then it'll use it. Otherwise, it creates its own index to create the open data path. If one exists, it'll use it. If it fits what it needs to do, it'll use that open data path. Otherwise, it creates its own.
So I still don't understand it completely. For example, I have application B that run on schema BBB, okay? And it's so slow, I try to optimize it. So I try to find out, do I have any views that exist for this specific application, that library in this schema, and I try to use this select for library BBB, and it comes with, let's say, 2 views, or is nothing. So what it means, what it will tell me. Do I need to go and create additional view that will match the logical files? Or
No.
No?
No, you only need a view if you need to have one. Typically, you don't normally put sorts in a view. See, now a view is more related to maybe a join logical, because you're typically joining tables in a view.
So
An index is more like a logical, where the logical has 4 keys and your index has 4 columns that it's using on the sort, order by rather, and that they are pretty much the same.
So in my problem, when I have a really slow application and I want to speed it up, obviously that what I try to do is, instead of running the code, which is 20 years old, I can use SQL, which will run much faster, right?
Well, depends on what you want to do with the view. I like to use views to do a lot of my table connectivity. Connect it all, 3, 4, 5 tables, whatever it is. there. That code stays in that. Many programs that use an SQL statement on the view, and I don't have to connect all those tables together, but in the view, and all these other programs, I don't have to worry about it. I just select it. That view combines all this stuff and all these things and maybe does some selections and whatever else. Now, if I need to have it run faster, I'll create an index over the table, and that'll speed it up. Those have been there forever. These tables, or views rather, are relatively new. Most of them came in around 7.1. I saw some come in around 6.1. But these, if you notice that sys tables, sys columns, and then it has the word stat after it, statistics. It's got more information about these columns and tables that you ever thought it was ever going to have. Sys partitions and sys program statement statistics. You get in some of these, there's going to be some interesting stuff down at the bottom. Table statistics, it gets the similar information as does the sys tables. However, we also, in this one you get the number of rows. That's in the other view. Deleted rows, the data size, that's in there. But these are not open, close, insert, update, lock, deletes. When you first start, when we put 7.1 on our system, that's when these statistics started. It's kept track of every time that table has been opened by whatever process, it records a number there when it opened. So it counts the number of opens, closes, inserts, updates, and all those. So you can look at a file, look at this entry. Now there's nothing there. That file has probably never been used, or it's not used in a long time. And there's about 6 timestamps. Last time used, date and time, timestamp created, last used, last saved, last restored. A couple others I don't recall off the top of my head. Even gives you how many times it was read. So it gives a lot of numbers out there on your tables. That SQL statement produced this. Notice in there you got the number of rows in the table, how many deleted rows that are still there, the size in bytes, how many times that file was opened, how many times there was inserts in it since this started. Now a lot of them are 0, but we didn't put 7.1 on the system until last year sometime, and this is a development or test database, so you're not going to get a lot of things read except for the common stuff. How many times a table was updated, deleted, how many reads on that table? And a lot of can't hide anything anymore now. Column statistics. It's similar to the table except it includes columns and gives pretty much similar information on that. Now, one more thing it's got the number of distinct values. Each column has a number of distinct values inside that column. It might be useful for something. I just thought it was interesting that they kept track of all of that. Of course, you got schema name, the table name. I included a member because that's just they called it a member depending on which column you used. I mixed up columns here just by mistake. These first two, in these views, there's 2 columns for the schema name. One column is schema name. It's 128 characters. There's another column called system schema name, and it's 10, and that's where and that's where you refer to a lot of times the library. So it has both, the 10 long and the 128 long.
Is it adding stuff to in that 128? Is the 128 actually using all 128 characters, or is it?
No, in our system, we only using 10, so only 10 are used. You know, now if you get in a system where you created your tables and give it a table name that long, well, it'll use that, the 128 will be used that much.
So the column distinct value has what? What it means, distinct value?
The what, distinct values?
Yes.
In that particular table, I forgot to put the column on there, or maybe I put the wrong thing in the wrong place. But distinct values, I left a column out. But that column that it's talking about has in the next case, 168 different values in it. Or 162 it was.
Distinct values.
Distinct values, yes.
It could have a million.
It could have a million, but only 162 distinct values. That's what they're talking about there. In that top one, I've left off the column name on the result here. But that column would only have one distinct value. It could be blank. That's one distinct value.
Is that the value that you can get by writing an SQL select distinct?
You could do that with that, but this table tells you that without having to write that statement.
It's not telling you what they are though, so I'm not quite sure why you need to know that count.
Well, it doesn't show the value. You'd have to do your own query later to get what those values were, but it's here, it's telling you that there's that many distinct values.
I'm trying to think of a situation where you need to know the count of how many
Distinct values? I thought it was just interesting, and I just included it in this sample. I could think of one thing is that in our application's order file, we have 4 statuses. And if I run this statement and there's 6 of them in there, there's 2 values that shouldn't be there.
Right. That'd be about the only reason I could.
Yeah, and there could be other things, but I said, what's this? Oh, and I said, okay, I just thought it was interesting, and I included it in the sample. Partition. We think of, partitions, you're thinking of system partition. No. We're thinking here, we're talking table partition. Or you probably refer to it as a member. But in SQL, they call it a partition. Okay, so, it's just, you got to keep track of both terminology because you see it in documentation both ways. So you got to, make sure you know what they're talking about. Here, I was just looking at the schema of the name, partition, number of rows. I just thought that was interesting. Where the table name is QRPGLE, we don't have many multi-member files in our system. We have a few, but not many. Source, I find that this is more useful looking up source than other things. So in that case, I just ran that table, I just picked out the first 10 or 12 members that are in that table, and I thought, well, I'll just put the number of rows over in there. So that's the number of rows in the source member on those particular programs. And it'll do the same thing if you had multi-member data files too. It doesn't matter. I've even done this. Went over here. This is your source member name. Called a partition. I put this. Search on this, and it'll bring me back these. Not everybody puts source in a QRPGLE source file name. They put it in who knows what. And you don't know what library it's in, so it will find it, and it'll bring back every. I'm going to use library file name for this purpose because it's more like what we're looking at source.
And some of them could, at some point, correspond to some program names or stuff in the end. Sometimes when you compile it,
Oh, you don't normally use a different name than the source? That's confusing, but I've seen that happen. I don't know that I think there's about 30 more columns of data that I couldn't put on the screen that you can get. I just picked these out as just something to give you an idea what it looked like. Okay, now this one is, I didn't know about this one. This was interesting here. System program statement status, or statistics rather. This contains one row for every SQL statement embedded in an RPG program. So we're selecting the module name, statement number. I just put that in there, and the text had to cast it. And then now notice I put the where system program schema. That's the 10-character program schema column. If I'd left off the word system, then that column is 128. But I'm just selecting. I could have picked either one. Didn't matter. Now here, you don't get exact statement. You get pretty close. The statement number 1 in that particular program, declare C1 cursor for S1. You've prepared a statement for S1 somewhere in the program, and it's declaring the cursor for it. The second statement in the program, physically located in that program, is select asterisk into a bunch of host variables. And it continued on for a lot of ways. And then out there at the end, it'll say from some library, or some table, where, whatever, if there is a where in there. And then statement 4 says prepare S1 from some host variable. You don't get the host variable name in here, but it gives you a lot. You can tell if you're looking for what program used a certain column or selected on something, or what program is using SQL to insert with, because if you're going to insert, you're going to have the word insert there, update, and that sort of stuff, so you can find them. This program statement statistics will get a row for every statement there is. There is another view, which I didn't include everything, sys program stat. It leaves the statement off. It just tells you what programs have an SQL statement in them and how many statements. It doesn't tell you what they are. It tells you how many they are and that they are one and some other data. But you go to this one, statement stat, it's the detail, if you will, and it gives a row for every statement there. I hadn't really looked in this too much, and I could see it having some uses, maybe more if you get, it's just more of trying to track something down than doing troubleshooting than other things that I could see right off. Any questions?